I remember the sound before anything else, the sharp clink of her fork against the plate. It wasn't the casual kind of clink you hear when someone's just setting down their utensil to take a sip of water. No, this was deliberate. Punctuation mark. A period in the middle of an unfinished sentence. Brooke looked across the table at me, her expression unreadable. The steam from the pasta still curled upward between us, carrying the scent of garlic and basil. But suddenly it all felt far away. Her tone was calm, almost clinical, when she spoke. "Adam," she said evenly, "I think we need to stop being an asterisk mate." It was the kind of sentence that doesn't fully register right away, like a car horn in the distance. My brain scrambled to catch up, trying to slot her words into a context that made sense. Maybe she meant for the week? Maybe she was sick? Maybe... No, she meant what she said. No more int asterisk Macy. I didn't ask why. Didn't protest. Didn't even give her the satisfaction of a visible reaction. My reply came out low and controlled, each syllable deliberate. "All right." That single word seemed to throw her. I saw it in the way her eyes flickered, a tiny hitch in her composure. She'd been expecting a fight. She didn't get one. She picked her fork back up and started eating again, her focus shifting back to the plate as if she hadn't just driven a steel wedge into the center of our marriage. Conversation after that was sparse. The usual small talk, the weather, something about a new client at her firm, floated between us like dry leaves skittering across pavement. When the plates were empty, I gathered them and headed for the sink. The faucet sputtered to life, the water running hot over my hands. That's when I noticed her work bag sitting open on the chair beside me. Brooke was in the living room, phone in hand, her voice light and easy as she laughed at something. Probably a text. I glanced at the bag, telling myself I was just moving it out of the way so I could wipe the table. But when I picked it up, the flap fell open. The first thing I saw was a hotel key card. White, embossed with the sleek logo of a boutique hotel on the Wilmington waterfront. I'd been to Wilmington with her before, once years ago when we were still in that early stage where every weekend away felt like an adventure. We hadn't been back since. Beneath the key card was a folded document, printed on thick paper. I pulled it out just far enough to read the header, Short-Term Loft Lease Agreement. My eyes scanned down until they caught on the names typed neatly in the tenant section, her full name and right next to it, Davis. No first name, just a last. Tucked behind it was a bank notification, the kind she gets when charges over a certain amount post to her account. This one was for a room for two. No date night we'd planned, no anniversary trip. Just 3 words on a piece of paper that seemed to pulse in my hand. The air in the kitchen felt heavier, thicker. I slid everything back exactly the way I'd found it, closed the flap, and set the bag down. My hands weren't shaking yet, but they wanted to. I rinsed the plates, stacked them in the dishwasher, and dried my hands slowly, like someone *ling time before walking into the next act of a play they didn't audition for. When I stepped into the living room, Brooke was scrolling through her phone, thumb flicking upward in a steady rhythm. "Find something interesting in there?" she asked without looking up, her tone light. I could have lied. I could have said no and waited until I had more pieces. But something in me wanted to see her reaction, to watch her choose her next move. I held up the hotel key card. "Care to explain?" She finally looked up, her expression shifting in microseconds. Surprise, then a flicker of calculation, before settling into something that resembled mild annoyance. "Oh, Adam," she sighed, as though I just asked her if the earth was flat. "This is exactly what I mean. This controlling streak. It's work. All of it. That key card. I was there for a client dinner and stayed over because I had meetings the next morning. The lease? Temporary office space we're using for a project. The bank notification? 2 colleagues split a room to save the company money, and it went through my card because the office manager was out sick. It's exhausting." There it was. The pivot. The reframing. In less than 2 minutes, she'd taken the key card, the lease, and the room for 2, and turned them into props in a story about my supposed distrust. I didn't argue, not because I believed her, far from it, but because I'd already decided something in that moment. I was done taking the bait. If this was a game, I wasn't gonna play it the way she wanted. All right, I said again, the same way I'd said it at dinner. She studied me for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she couldn't decide whether I just accepted her explanation or quietly called her bluff. Then she looked back at her phone, the conversation over in her mind. But in mine, it had only just **n. After that dinner, life didn't explode. It frayed. Threads came loose in places most people wouldn't notice, but I did, because it was my life unraveling. I told myself I'd keep calm, observe, write things down. If Brooke wanted to run the controlling husband script, I wasn't going to feed it with panic. I'd be quiet, present, recording. The first note in my phone is boring. Location services off at 10:41 p.m. It's the kind of thing that could happen by accident if you didn't know Brooke. Her phone had been surgically attached to her hand for years. She knew every setting better than I did. At 1:07 a.m., it flickered back on, a tiny green dot teleporting 3 miles across town and settling near a row of new-build lofts by the river. She said she'd gone to bed early. She even yawned while she said it. Then came the gaps. Her route history, which usually painted a neat highlighter trail from office to home to grocery store, started returning with bald patches, like someone had taken an eraser to the screen. No significant locations. Insufficient data. The phone was suddenly amnesiac, but only at night. Her fitness tracker was more honest. Brooke had never been a midnight pacer. She's one of those people who falls asleep mid-episode and wakes up rested. But the tracker logged steps, hundreds. After 12:30 a.m., the graphs rose and fell like a heartbeat. Kitchen to hallway, hallway to door, door to elevator, out and back again. Meanwhile, I was supposedly asleep next to her. Except I wasn't. I was learning a new kind of insomnia, the kind that listens for keys, elevators, laughter muffled by a closing door. I told myself to be generous. People go through phases. Work gets intense. Maybe she walked at night, tried a new routine, forgot to charge her phone. So I waited for something that couldn't be folded into a reasonable excuse. It arrived as paper. I was emptying the recycling when I found the receipt from an upscale bar in Charleston. 2 glasses of wine, 1 appetizer, a late time stamp, the kind of receipt you tuck into a wallet because it felt special. Brooke and I had never been there together. We'd never done Charleston together. Her job did, apparently, because the signature looked like her fast, slanted initials. Then came the chargers. 2 of them, identical to the one on her nightstand, coiled neatly in the side pocket of her tote. "Back up," she said, smiling like I just asked why a person keeps an umbrella in the car. We already had 3. "I like having what I need," she said. The scent on her jacket that week wasn't one of hers. And it wasn't new to the world, it was just new to us. Bright, expensive, lingering 3 feet after she walked away, like it wanted to make sure I noticed. Toll records were the first thing I checked that felt like a cop move, and I hated that it came naturally. The statement sat there with its tidy line items, dates, times, amounts, like a polite witness. Crossings over the Cape Fear Bridge appeared on nights she told me she was at a client dinner in town. If there'd been 1, I'd have let it go. Instead, there were 3, then 5. A pattern is just a coincidence that refuses to stop. Her business trips lined up with conference weekends, which wouldn't be notable if those conferences weren't held a short walk from the same boutique hotel where I'd found the key card. I checked the event pages, speakers, agendas, happy hours with sponsors, and there she was in a tagged photo off to the side, laughing with a small circle that included a man with the stiff posture of someone who takes pictures for a living. The caption was something bland about innovation. The comments were inside jokes I didn't get. I kept trying to argue with myself. Everything has a story that isn't betrayal. Location services glitch. People network. Wine comes in pairs. Bridges get crossed. But when the details stack perfectly, even the gentlest stories buckle. One night, she came home with a little paper wristband, the kind they give you at sponsored hotel events. She peeled it off and tossed it in the trash while telling me about a long day in meetings. I fished it out later, embarrassed at myself. Printed on the inside in tiny text, "Waterfront social, room key required." I set it back in the bin and stared at it like it might start speaking. There were little phrases that started showing up in her mouth that didn't sound like her. Bandwidth. Q3 runway. I'll circle back. Brooke is smart, but her language used to be rooted in people, names, jokes, stories. Now she talked like she'd swallowed a deck of slides. It felt like watching someone move into a new dialect she didn't need with me. And then the perfume again. A different one this time, smoky and warm. It clung to the inside of her coat like it had paid rent. When I hugged her hello, she patted my back with one hand, already angling toward the bathroom. I stood there and watched the door close, understanding that there are ways to be alone while sharing a mortgage. I started saving small things to a folder on my computer labeled with something boring. Taxes_2023, so I wouldn't question why it existed. Screensh *TS of her shared calendar showing a sudden fondness for personal errand. Photos of the tracker graphs. The Charleston receipt. Scanned. A screensh *T of the conference map with a circle around the boutique hotel. Sitting like a friend at the edge of the festivities. The cruelest detail was ordinary. On a Tuesday night, she texted me, running late, grabbing a salad. The building's package cam caught her stepping into the lobby 30 minutes later with a to-go bag from a place that doesn't sell salads, laughing at something over her shoulder. The frame clipped a man's shoulder beside her. You couldn't see his face, just the edge of a suit, a hand, the flash of a watch. She looked happy in the way people do when they forget the camera exists. Individually, none of it could convict anyone of anything. Together, it was a breadcrumb trail that didn't want to end at our front door. I realized I wasn't looking for one grand confession. I was counting small, truthful things and seeing where they pointed. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I learned the rhythm. When location went dark, when steps rose, when tolls chimed, when late meetings aligned with riverfront sunsets on co-workers' stories. I noticed a second stainless mug appear in her car, not from our kitchen set. I noticed she started taking the stairs instead of the elevator when she came home, as if avoiding the camera's angle. I noticed that my own voice got quieter, like whispering would keep the house from noticing with me. The last note in that stretch is just a line. New perfume, jacket pocket, Friday. I wrote it at 2:13 a.m., lying awake and listening to the elevator cables hum like a faraway violin. If you read those notes as a stranger, you might think the author is paranoid. Maybe he is. Or maybe he's a husband learning that the body can know the truth before the heart can pronounce it. By then, even generosity felt like denial dressed up for church. Each detail could be innocent on its own. Together they drew an arrow with my name on it, pointing directly toward someone else. The first time suspicion turns into certainty, it doesn't feel like the movies. There's no crash of thunder, no melodramatic slow-motion gasp. It's quieter than that, like a door clicking shut in a hallway you thought was empty. It happened on a Tuesday before dawn. I'd been lying in bed, awake but motionless, trying to decide whether it was worth pretending to sleep. That's when I heard the muffled slide of the lobby door downstairs and the faint hum of the elevator cables. Not unusual, we live in a building where people keep odd hours. Curiosity nudged me out of bed. I padded to the living room and cracked the blinds just enough to see the street lamp glow. And there she was, Brooke, walking across the lot with someone. It wasn't a friendly walk and talk. They were close. Their shoulders touched now and then, and when they reached the entrance, he let her walk in first, then followed, his hand brushing the small of her back like he owned the right to be there. I might have convinced myself I was imagining the int * Macy if it weren't for the building's entry camera. Residents have access to the recordings through an app. It's mostly for package theft and tracking contractors. I opened it on my phone like I was checking the weather. There they were again, captured in the crisp, indifferent eye of the lens. She swiped her card, held the door, and they stepped into the lobby together. They took the elevator up. 40 minutes later, the same man exited alone, wearing the same clothes, holding her event badge in one hand. I watched the clip 3 times. My heart rate didn't spike the way I expected. Instead, there was a strange steadiness, like my body was bracing for impact that had already happened. Later that day, a neighbor caught me in the hallway. She's one of those people who thrives on conversation about nothing, male mix-ups, weather patterns, the latest gossip from the dog park. But that morning, her voice dropped. "Late night?" she asked. I frowned. If she tolerated it long enough for a neighbor to notice, it wasn't just about the smoke. That was the moment the invisible line between suspicion and proof burned away. I'd spent weeks documenting hints, assembling a picture in pencil. Now the lines were inked. The image was undeniable. I didn't confront her that morning. I didn't even mention the clip. There's a peculiar power in knowing something the other person doesn't realize you know. Instead, I let her play out her day like normal. She left for work at 8:17 a.m. wearing the same blazer I'd seen draped over her arm in the footage. She kissed me goodbye on the cheek like she'd done nothing but sleep peacefully in our bed. I watched her walk to the elevator, my hands in my pockets, and thought, 40 minutes. He was here for 40 minutes. What can you possibly do in 40 minutes that's innocent enough to survive sunlight? The answer didn't matter. The clip already told the truth. I kept my face neutral when she got home that evening, asking about her day, listening to a short anecdote about a client call that went sideways. Her voice was smooth, her laugh in the right places, but there was something new in her eyes, an alertness, a readiness to pivot. It's the look of someone who knows they're managing a story. I noticed she didn't mention where she'd been the night before. No late meeting ran long. No stayed to help with prep. Nothing. Silence where an alibi would normally go. That night, I cued the footage on my laptop while she showered. Watching it on a bigger screen made it worse. You could see how her body angled toward him, the ease in their pace, the way they didn't rush when they entered the building, like the hallway was theirs. I paused on the frame where he leaves. The event badge dangled from his hand, swinging slightly as he pushed through the lobby door. It was hers. The lanyard was the same navy blue one she'd worn to that conference 2 weeks earlier. She told me it was somewhere in her desk drawer. The timestamp on the exit was 1:42 a.m. He didn't look back. I thought about sending her the clip, about forwarding it to her work email with nothing but the subject line. "Is this your client?" But there was something satisfying in keeping it for myself, adding it to the growing archive in taxes_2023. Evidence ages well when it's airtight. The following weekend, I caught another small fracture. We were in the kitchen. She was making coffee, and I casually mentioned running into our neighbor. "She said she heard you laughing in the hallway late the other night," I said, stirring sugar into my mug. Brooke didn't miss a beat. "Oh yeah, we came back from drinks with the team. Sarah from marketing smokes, probably what she smelled. She said it so easily I almost admired it. The only problem, Sarah from marketing lives 2 hours away and has a toddler. I'd met her once at a holiday party, where she told me she barely leaves her house after dark. I nodded anyway, as if satisfied. Sometimes agreeing is the best way to keep the talking going. After she left for errands that afternoon, I pulled up the clip again. This time I watched for what wasn't there. No second woman, no Sarah from marketing, no third voice in the echo of the hallway. Just Brooke, just him, just the badge in his hand as he walked away. It was no longer about if. It was about how long and how far. The proof sat in a folder on my laptop, a silent witness to the shift in our marriage. And I realized something unsettling. The more certain I became, the less I wanted a confrontation in the heat of the moment. There's no power in yelling at someone who's already rehearsed their lines. The power is in knowing the truth before they realize they've been caught, and deciding when to let them see that you know. For now, I stayed silent. Let her talk. Let her craft her little stories. Let her believe the camera was just a black bubble in the ceiling, not a mirror showing me exactly who she'd become. And 40 minutes at 1:42 a.m. became the quiet drumbeat in the back of my mind, impossible to unhear. The night I decided to leave, nothing dramatic happened. No screaming match, no slammed doors. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that disappears in memory unless you attach something permanent to it. I'd been sitting at my desk for most of the evening, rewatching the same 30-second clip from the building camera until it stopped feeling like video and started feeling like a memory of my own. I closed the laptop, stood up, and started making a list in my head of what I would take. Clothes, toiletries, the framed photo of my father and me on the pier, the dog's leash. I knew better than to pack when she was home. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an extraction. The next morning, I told her I'd be staying downtown for a while to focus on work. She didn't ask why. The windows faced west, catching the last orange light of the day. It felt foreign but clean, like a place with no history waiting for one to be written. I left her a note on the kitchen counter. Not a manifesto, not even a goodbye. Just a typed page with a bullet point list of shared belongings to divide. Who got the blender, the cookware, the bookshelf. No accusations, no explanations. I knew if I started writing what I really thought, it would turn into a letter she could twist into something else. Within a day, the messages began. First, a text. Can we talk? Please. Then a voicemail. Shaky but deliberate. Adam, I think you're overreacting. We need to sit down and figure this out. You're making a mistake walking away like this. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted. Emails arrived, longer than anything she'd written me in years. They all had a rhythm, apology, medical detail, emotional plea. She wrote about a difficult personal condition she'd been struggling to manage. She mentioned a recent visit to a clinic, left vague enough to invite sympathy but specific enough to sound irrefutable. It was deliberate, the way she was trying to reframe the story. In her telling, my leaving wasn't about her actions. It was about my inability to be supportive during her health crisis. She made herself the center of the harm, painting me as cold, unfeeling, unwilling to stand by her in her hour of need. One email in particular stood out. It began with, "I know I've been distant, but it's because I didn't want you to see me like this," and ended with, "If you walk away now, you'll regret not being there when I needed you most." It was manipulative in its precision, the way she'd pivoted from denial to a plea for pity without ever touching the truth. The hotel keycard, the loft lease, the building footage, none of that existed in her version. I didn't take the bait. My replies were short and factual. Noted. I'll review the list and confirm. You can keep the cookware. By the end of the week, I'd filed for legal separation. My lawyer didn't need a deep dive into the emotional backstory. The evidence spoke for itself, but I kept collecting. *TS, receipts, timestamps, every small piece that could anchor the narrative to reality if she tried to rewrite it in court. A few days later, a mutual friend called. "She's telling people you abandoned her during a medical scare," he said, his voice low like we were trading state secrets. "She's crying in front of people, Adam, making it sound like you just walked out." I felt my jaw tighten. "Let her talk," I said. "I've got the truth." It wasn't easy hearing my character dismantled in rooms I couldn't walk into. Friends I'd known for years now carried only her side of the story, each retelling sanding down her choices until they looked like accidents. But that's how Brooke operated. Never outright lies, just enough omissions to tilt the table in her favor. Once, she sent a voice message. Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying for hours. "I don't know how we got here. You used to be my best friend. I don't understand why you won't just talk to me. I'm not the villain you've made me out to be." I played it twice. The first time, I almost let it hit. The second time, I caught the way her tone shifted halfway through, how the tears sharpened into indignation. She wasn't just sad. She was annoyed that her performance wasn't working. She didn't know that by then. I'd stopped needing her to confirm anything. The truth didn't require her confession. It was in the receipts, in the 40-minute clip, in the neighbor's casual observation, in the trail of details she'd been careless enough to leave behind. The only thing I wanted from her now was distance. I told my lawyer to handle all communication through email. I stopped checking the shared calendar. I muted her number. When she sent a photo of the dog curled on the couch, I saved it without replying. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about not giving her any more openings to maneuver. One Saturday, I stopped by the house to collect the last of my things. She wasn't there, but the place felt smaller somehow, as if it had shrunk to fit her version of events. My toothbrush was still in the cup by the sink. The sweater I'd been looking for hung in the front closet, faintly carrying the scent of that cologne I didn't own. I took what was mine and left the rest. The drive back to the apartment felt lighter, even with the boxes in the back seat shifting on turns. In the weeks that followed, she kept testing the perimeter. A comment on a mutual friend's social media post. "I hope you're doing okay." Text on a random Tuesday. Once, she emailed me a *T of an inspirational quote about forgiveness. I didn't reply to any of it. My silence wasn't anger, it was strategy. She wanted to pull me back into the arena, to make me debate the facts until the facts themselves blurred. I wasn't giving her that chance. The separation wasn't an end in itself. It was the clean space I needed to prepare for whatever came next. And I had no doubt she'd take the next round public. People like Brooke can't stand an unfinished narrative. They'll fill the silence with their own voice if you don't fill it for them. I planned to do exactly that. On my own terms. The first hearing felt less like a legal proceeding and more like theater. The courtroom was small, carpet muted, walls lined with that pale wood paneling you can't buy anywhere except government supply. My lawyer sat beside me, flipping through the binder we'd put together. Dates, receipts, *TS, camera footage, all stacked in clean chronological order. The evidence was there. All we had to do was present it. But Brooke had a different plan. When she walked in, she looked nothing like the woman from the lobby camera or the conference photos. She'd traded her fitted blazers for a loose cardigan, her hair pulled back in a way that made her face seem drawn. Even her makeup was dialed down, just enough to give the impression of someone weary, someone struggling. She didn't look at me when she took her seat at the petitioner's table. But I noticed the tissue already folded in her hand, a prop ready for its cue. When it was her turn to speak, she leaned into the microphone and began with, "I've been going through a very difficult personal health crisis." Her voice wavered at just the right moment, as though the memory alone was almost too much to bear. The details she gave were vague, but deliberate. A condition she'd been trying to manage, the emotional toll of not feeling supported, the loneliness of facing it without a partner's presence. She never named the condition. She never produced a medical record. But she didn't have to. The point wasn't proof, it was performance. She framed my leaving as a kind of abandonment, carefully sidestepping the timeline that would have shown exactly what I'd already uncovered before I walked out. The hotel keycard, the 40-minute visit, the lease with Davis, none of it appeared in her account. She left out entire months. I whispered to my lawyer. He didn't look up from his notes. "She's painting the picture she wants the court to see," he said quietly. "We'll get our turn." Brooke dabbed her eyes with the tissue, glancing toward the judge without holding eye contact too long, just enough to suggest vulnerability, not manipulation. She spoke about a breakdown in communication, about my increasing withdrawal, about how I'd refused to discuss solutions. Listening to her was like hearing a stranger's version of my life. In her telling, there was no Wilmington waterfront, no conference nights with overlapping dates and unexplained receipts. There was only a woman trying to hold her marriage together while her husband drifted away. When she mentioned the dog, her voice softened further. Even our sweet boy seemed confused. He didn't understand why Adam was gone. That line got to me not because it was true in the way she meant, but because it was true in the way she didn't. The dog had watched me pack, tail low, eyes following me to the door. He didn't understand why I was leaving, but he would have understood less if I'd stayed. My lawyer leaned over. "Don't react," he murmured. I kept my face neutral, hands folded on the table. I knew better than to give her performance any fuel. The more she painted me as cold and unfeeling, the more she wanted me to break that facade. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't launch into the evidence. I didn't even mention the footage. I kept it measured, factual. I confirmed dates, explained the separation process, and made it clear I was prepared to cooperate on property division. No accusations, no grand statements. The judge listened, nodded, and moved on to procedural matters. Brooke sat with her tissue, head slightly bowed, the very image of someone enduring an injustice she couldn't quite put into words. When we left the courtroom, my lawyer caught my eye. "She's good," he said. "She's not after winning this hearing. She's after building a narrative. Sympathy now pays off later." I nodded. Then we make sure later comes with the truth. Outside, Brooke walked past me without acknowledgement, surrounded by two friends I recognized from her office. I caught a fragment of her voice. He just left. I didn't even get a chance to explain before they rounded the corner. That night, I opened the binder on my kitchen table and started going through it page by page. The urge to unload everything at once was strong, but I knew patience mattered more. You don't drop the whole file in one move. You let them commit to their version, let them build it high enough that when it falls hard. In the official notes from the hearing, I saw the words health crisis and lack of support appear twice. There was no mention of key cards or loft leases, no reference to unexplained toll records or midnight steps logged on a fitness tracker. The truth was still mine to hold, and hers to be confronted with at the right time. I thought about how easily stories bend in rooms like that. If you don't anchor them to something solid, they drift until the truth is unrecognizable. Brooke wasn't lying in the blatant sense. She was omitting with surgical precision. And the court, for now, had no reason to doubt her. Back in my apartment, the espresso smell had started to fade, replaced by something warmer. My own cooking, the faint trace of laundry detergent. I sat on the couch with the binder open beside me, feeling the weight of the paper, the stillness of knowing exactly what had happened and exactly what she'd said instead. It wasn't anger I felt in that moment. It was resolve. If she wanted to turn the courtroom into a stage, I'd make sure the final act was one she couldn't control. The curtain hadn't closed. It hadn't even dropped yet.